Hello there, friends and sane persons, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, and Wednesday Whimsy is, of course, a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game, a top 10 list, some sort of topic, usually board game related, that happens to be on my mind. We are, of course, right smack dab in the middle of Top 100 season, where I'm going over my top 100 board games of all time, talking about them all very briefly. These episodes are a little on the long side because I'm going to be talking about 20 games today. These are my numbers 60 through 41, which of course means that it's probably the part of the top 10 nobody cares about, but that doesn't matter. I care about these games. I think they're fantastic, and I look forward to talking about them with you. Hopefully you will enjoy this discussion, and if not, I guess no one's forcing you to watch this, so go do something else. Anyway, without much further ado, because I want to keep this pretty short, let's go ahead and get started with my number 60. My number 60 is a game that was in my top 10 for a while. I just don't play it very often, and some of the looks of it don't look as good as it used to, and it's hard to find, but it's still pretty good. This game is Chaos in the Old World. This was kind of I think it was my first Eric Lang game. This is definitely the inspiration behind games like Blood Rage. In this game, you are in the Warhammer universe, a universe I know nothing about other than that it's a big minis game. And you are one of 4, or eventually in the expansion 5, gods of this world, and you are competing for the souls of men. There's a blood god who's all about killing. There's a temptation god who's all about, well, tempting people. A variety of different things you are, but what you're doing is you're using sort of this power track and taking your turns trying to make it last. You're going around and attacking, and you're trying to get points, but each of the characters has an alternate way to win. And so there's some sort of a factor that if you focus on it and you do it on your turn, you turn this wheel, and the wheel will advance you towards another way to have victory. It's one of the first games I ever played with exploding dice, where you'll roll the dice, and on a 6, it counts as a success, and then you roll again. The different characters are fun, lots of different power cards that you're playing, and just a really interesting game, kind of a creepy aesthetic with that sort of stretched skin map. And again, I don't know much about the background, but I love the game. And that is my number 60, Chaos in the Old World. Let's go on to my number 59. My number 59 is Messina 1347. And if I have trouble remembering that, that's because the date doesn't really say anything to me. Messina 1347 is by one of my favorite designers, Vladimir Suchy, and it is a game about the Black Plague. So you're in Italy, I guess, in in the 1300s. The Black Plague is coming, and you are trying to fight it off. You have these characters that or these meeples you're going to place on the board. You'll move them around from location to location, and if you happen to be on a spot with plague, you can use fire to fight it off, and that will move you up on certain tracks. You also will be able to build buildings that you can take over the spots, so that you can get more points when people activate them. There's also this wheel thing over here, and you have your workers. So as you go in and do all of your actions, there are these worker people, these worker tokens that are going to be out on the different spots, and you will collect them. And if they are sick, right, if they're in a spot with a plague, they're going to go to a quarantine house, and you'll be able to build up your quarantine house so that they can produce resources for you while they're there. And then eventually they're going to come to this board, and on this board, you're going to move these tracks around and be able to activate the different people you've placed in different ways. A lot of stuff going on, more than I can talk about in just a few minutes, but a really interesting game. Not the most interesting theme. There's a lot of games about sort of the Black Plague time, but really a fun and interesting take on all of those. I quite enjoy Messina 1347. Next up, we have a game that I have played lots of times. It's a huge game. It's a totally themeless game, but it's a fantastic one nonetheless. And this game is Tapestry. Tapestry, by acclaimed designer Jamie Stegmaier, is a civilization game in name only. In this game, you are moving up tracks. You've got sort of 4 tracks, or eventually If you have the expansion, you've got 5 tracks. And what you're doing on your turn is you'll move up on a track and you will do the action that it gives you. Very simple rules. You will, of course, have to learn what all of the symbols mean, but it sort of becomes intuitive, and after you've played it once, everything makes perfect sense to you. You also have these civilizations which have a special ability. They're not like real civilizations. It's not, ancient Rome or ancient Russia or ancient India. It's the explorers and the merchants and the merrymakers and the inventors. It's some sort of, just descriptive term. I'll say the theme really light here, very, very pasted on, but really a fantastic game that's held up really well. It's one of those games that gets better each time I play it. Nice figures as well, especially if you get the bases for these things so that they can actually take up the right number of spaces. It's also a secret polyomino game. So there you go. My number 58, Tapestry. My number 57 is a game by sort of this Italian game design group that I really love. And it features Simone Luciani, who's one of my favorite game designers. This is a game about running a hotel in Austria, the Grand Austria Hotel. So in this game, really what it's about is dice selection. And so you're going to have all these dice that are rolled, and they're going to go on spots based on their number, and those are the actions you can perform. On your turn, you'll select a die and perform that action with the strength that's equal to the number of dice that are there. And you can also pass and re-roll, and ultimately what you're trying to do is to build rooms in your hotel, get guests to go into those rooms, bribe them with food and drink so that they'll stay, and complete various other goals. Lots of points, not a lot of theme. Again, there's a great expansion that adds several modules to it, and it's just a game that holds up really well and that I really enjoy. It probably is the most closely connected to another of their games called Golem, not thematically, but sort of with its mechanisms. Anyway, it's one I really enjoy. It's got, it's not for everyone. And again, the theme isn't super strong here. I guess I should have put the title on, Grand Austria Hotel. And now let's take it off as we move to my number 56. My number 56 is one of my most played games for sure. It's a game that I remember just having this fantastic time in Sweden. I guess between Estonia and Sweden, I took a cruise ship, and I was just sort of playing this on the deck as the sun went down, playing it solo. This is a game about murder and profit, and that game is The Bloody Inn. In The Bloody Inn, you are an innkeeper. It's based on an old French movie that I've never seen. You are an innkeeper, and you are trying to show people into your inn, and you'll want them to stay in your room so that you get money. But more often than not, you'll be recruiting them to help you, which means adding the cards to your hand, or using them to murder other guests so that you can then bury their bodies in the backyard and collect all the money that was in their pockets. Kind of a grim theme, but a great one to play, sort of especially around Halloween time. There's these police officers that will show up in the inn, and if they're still around at the end of the round, anyone with unburied bodies is in trouble. But, you can always make sure they're not around by killing them or by putting them in your hand. There's a lot of sort of interaction. It's an interesting game because you're going to go through the deck twice, so you'll see what's in there the first time, and you can kind of plan for different ways to score. There's an interesting mechanism where you can't have more than $40 in cash, and so you can take a pass turn, which is kind of a waste, but that will enable you to turn all your cash into these checks, which are worth 10 points each, and so you'll be able to sort of store money as the game goes on. Just a very interesting game. It's especially good at solo, but amazing at 2 and pretty good at 3 as well. There's also a decent expansion for it that adds some quirky extra characters and some other special abilities and things to explore. I really enjoy The Bloody Inn. It's one of my go-to travel games, and it is my number 56, and there we have it. My number 55 is not a travel game at all, and I just heard there's a new re-implementation of it that's coming out with a firefighter theme that I'll be interested in checking out. But for right now, the game I'm going to talk about is Project Elite. Project Elite is a game where you are a group of people and you are fighting against a huge horde, a wave of aliens. And so these aliens are going to come in at you, and it's a real-time cooperative game. You set a timer, usually 2 minutes, and you just go. You're going to roll dice and use the dice to move, use the dice to shoot, use the dice to activate other abilities, search for new equipment, and then ultimately you're trying to complete these objectives. If you complete all the objectives and make it home before somebody dies or before you lose due to the aliens making it to your base, well, then you win. It's a frantic real-time game. It's just so much fun. It works well with lots of people, especially with people who aren't super sophisticated with games, because it just sort of you kind of have these phases. You've got this moment of intense action, and then you've got sort of a leisurely resolution of that action, which you can do cooperatively. Just a lot of fun. I really enjoy Project Elite. Next up, we have one of those games that I have a friend who always loves to play this game, and it's one of the few games that I'll actually play in teams. There's a team variant as well. This game is Concordia. Concordia is a fantastic game with, the theme of trading in the Mediterranean. You are, look, there's no theme here. Honestly, I'll just say it. What you're doing in Concordia is you have this hand of cards, and each turn you're going to play a card and do its action, and then you eventually will have a card that will pick up all of your previous cards. It gives you some sort of a bonus, but you're kind of timing when you're going to play that reset card, or are you going to be able to make your kind of actions last a little bit. The other interesting thing, though, is that each of the cards has a scoring condition on it. And so you're going to be buying cards from this card row up here, but you're not just buying them for the action they're going to do for you. You also might want to buy them for the scoring condition that they trigger. And so you can kind of customize how you're going to be experiencing scoring in this game, and I find it just fascinating. Concordia is a great game. I have not played it with the 2-player or with the team version up to 6, but I have played it with up to 4, both, competitively and the team variant. I think both are very interesting, and it's just a fantastic game, one that I'm always looking to play. That's my number 54. Let's go on to my number 53, and my number 53 almost feels it is a brand new game. It is the newest game on my list, at least as of the time I'm making it, and that is Nucleum. So Nucleum, if I were to make the list again today, it might even be higher. Nucleum is just such a fantastic game. The time I made the list, I had not, I'd only played it a few times. I now have a copy, and I've played it more. This is the game for me. I mean, I think this is probably going to be in my top 20 the next time I do this list. By two of my favorite designers, Luciani and David Turzi. This is a game about building a network, an infrastructure, building buildings, creating power sources, powering your buildings, and completing contracts. There's just a lot of stuff going on here. The theme, loose. The board is a little bit ugly, but the gameplay, this is a game where it takes like 3 hours to play with 4 players. I don't notice the time. I am involved in the game always. On your turn, you're selecting that you've got these little action tokens, and you can use them either for their actions, or you can place them out on the board and potentially use them for your actions. But if that happens, they don't come back to you. And so you're trying to expand your network. You've got 4 different kind of characters. They're called experiments. They're not really characters, but sets of player powers, technologies to upgrade, just a lot to love here. I'm definitely going to do a Wednesday Whimsy on this one, just on the game itself. But again, I honestly think 53 is a little bit low for this, and the game still hasn't reached widespread retail. I played this all the time at the Dice Tower Retreat, and I am looking to play it all the time here now that it's at home. Anyway, that's my number 53, Nucleum. My number 52 is another game. This just seems like the Luciani segment of the list. This is a game, and there's actually 2 games in here, but I've definitely played one more than the other. The game is called The Voyages of Marco Polo. So in this game, you are, famed famed explorer Marco Polo or some other famed explorer from that time period. And you are traveling around fulfilling contracts, leaving stations on different, sort of trying to leave your mark on different parts of the world. But the sort of core mechanism of the game is going to be this dice placement. So you have a certain number of dice, you'll roll them, and then you'll place them out on actions. But kind of the hook here is that no one is ever blocked. You can always go to a space that someone else has gone to. You just have to pay a little bit of money. And so if you get there first, you get there cheaper, but you kind of have to choose, what order you're going to do these actions in. And then sort of the thing everyone always remembers about this game is all the special abilities. There are some fantastic special abilities. Each of them feels super strong. And so you always kind of feel like, okay, I'm doing something special that no one else can do. The game itself is just a really fascinating one. Marco Polo 2, The Service of the Khan, is compatible with it, but is really exactly the same game, just with a slightly different map and a different set of special powers. Marco Polo is a game I just love, and it is just at the very bottom of my bottom 50 of my top 100. A great game, and one I really need to get to play again. There we go. Let's talk now about my number 51, the bottom of the top, I guess, as it were. This is a game that is just kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It was my favorite game the year it came out, which was 2020. And it's a game that I just love to play because it works well with so many people, and it works well with different levels of experience. The game is called, not The Voyages of Marco Polo, the game is called Nidavellir. So in Nidavellir, you have, thematically, you're some tribe of dwarves, and you're making weapons or something for the gods. but really, what you're doing is you have these 5 coins. Oops, I'm not showing that there, am I? You have 5 coins, and you're going to be placing 3 of the coins on each of these 3 selection spots that correspond to the 3 areas of the game. Each area is going to have a certain number of cards. And the person who has the highest bid in that area is going to get first choice of the cards. You also have 1 token that is a 0, and when you use your 0, you're going to take the 2 coins you didn't use, add them together, and throw out the highest value, and then take a coin that's equal to their combined value. So you're gradually upgrading your coins as the game goes on, and that is unbelievably satisfying. There are 2 expansions for the game, which are good, not great. Neither one is essential. The game has a lot of symbols, and both of the expansions kind of exacerbate that problem. But it is just sort of at its core, there's so many different things you can try. Each of the different colors of cards scores separately. You're also trying to get sort of deep and wide. If you get 1 card of each color, you're going to be able to get some special bonus cards. Just a fascinating game, one that really has a lot of legs and still sticks around and is one of my go-to games if I have somebody who I don't know very well, or if I have somebody that I want to make sure that we have a good time. This is a game that I will pick because it's almost a surefire success. And so with that, we're now into the top 50 games. It's no longer my top 100. It is now my top 50. And the first entry on the top 50 is a fantastic game, one of the best deck building games there is, and this game is Clank. So Clank here is a game, I rate this game a 10 out of 10. You are an adventurer going through a dungeon. The way that it works is you have a hand of cards. The cards give you access to move. They give you access to weapons to fight monsters. They give you access to some currency that you'll use to buy new cards. It's basically just straight deck building, except you also have this spatial element as you're moving around the board. Additionally, some cards are going to cause you to make noise, which is called clank, which goes off to the side, and eventually when the dragon activates, which is through some cards, you'll pick up all of the tokens that are off the board, put them in a bag, and you'll draw them out. And if yours gets drawn, well, that's a damage to you. You take, I believe, 10 damage, and you're dead. And then you lose. Unless, of course, you've gotten a treasure and gotten back above the ground level, and then you might still win, although it's unlikely. And so you're trying to time how far do you go into the dungeon? When do you grab your treasure and reverse course for the door? There are several versions of this. There's this one. There's Clank Legacy, which is fantastic. There's Clank in Space, which I like. There is also Clank. What is it called? It's Clank Catacombs, in which the board isn't a fixed board. It's kind of variable. So lots of different ways to play, lots of different boards for even base Clank with different expansions. Just something that's so interesting. I'm very excited for Clank Legacy Season 2. I rate all the Clanks together. There's not really, I mean, base Clank I think is still my favorite with its expansions because there's more variety there, but they're all really the same game, and it's a game I really enjoy. Let's go on now to my number 49. My number 49 is a large game. So I said that Tapestry was a Civilization game in name only. This game is also not, the theme isn't that strong here, but it is still a fantastic game, and it's a little bit more thematic than Tapestry. And this game is Mosaic. Mosaic, a story of civilization. Why am I not seeing it here? There we go. There we go. Number 49, Mosaic. So Mosaic, what Mosaic excels in is being really simple to play. On your turn, you take an action. You've got a few action choices. They're all really simple. Usually it's take a card. Sometimes it's involving placing these cities or whatever. And there's a bunch of ways to score. There's a bunch of different technologies you can build. And it's a civilization game, really, with all of the complexity that sometimes accompanies those games stripped away. I just got the new expansion for it. I haven't even tried it yet, but I'm really excited to. The problem with this game, though, is that it is huge. It takes up so much space. I have the Colossal Edition, so that might be part of the problem. But, if it's just, you need a really big table for it. It can also be a little bit long, especially as you add more players. I think 3 is the best number, although 2 is pretty good as well. And solo's a little bit too complicated to be fun. But, with the right player count and the right players, this game, and with enough space, this game can really sing. I really love my 49 Mosaic. My next one is another game that is not simple at all, and that game is Root, the woodland game of might and right. I'm not putting that subtitle in here. Root is a combat game. It is a mean, nasty combat game where you are one of several cute forest creatures, and you are going at it, man. Each of these creatures has a different way that it will score. So each one has a different set of rules. It's basically, if you play with 4 players, 4 different games that share sort of some common themes. There's also expansions that add additional characters. They're all interesting. They're all viable. But it's sort of maximizing your own path to victory that really is where the game excels. The variety here is off the charts. It is a game that does not fit in a box. It is in several boxes. It's obnoxiously large to store, and it's also very difficult to teach. I will say that the app is fantastic. Many of the expansions and factions are on the app, and that's the way to learn it, honestly. And then you can kind of come and play it at the table. It is a hard game to teach, a hard game to learn, but a very rewarding one once you get into it. I really enjoy Root, the woodland game of might and right. Let's go on now. We're making good time so far, but we're also only halfway done. Let's go on to another game that is vicious and in your face. My number 47 is Kemet. So whereas Root was all about kind of being different, Kemet is more about being the same. Every player is going to kind of start on the same level, but you are going to specialize really quickly. Kemet is a game of combat. That is where this game is. I've found the Kickstarter edition. That's the version I have, I guess. But it probably won't show you very much of it. Anyway, well, it's all right. You have a board, and you are moving around. You are always very close, so it's easy to invade. The game rewards you for attacking. You're trying to get to a certain number of points, and the points can be gained by winning a combat if you were the attacker. They can be gained by holding certain positions. Usually, if you're the defender, You win, you just keep your position, you don't get any bonus. So you have to be really careful about that. You're also you've got this currency of prayer points, or PP, which always gets a giggle. And you're using it to buy these upgrade tiles. You have you have 3 pyramids that you have access to, and those will dictate what kinds of upgrades you can get. There are actually 5 that you can play with in the game, so you'll never use all of them. And there's a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different monsters. You have these large minis that will show up and kind of command your troops. It's just a really fascinating game, especially if you can get people who will, pay attention and take it in the series, in sort of the spirit that it's meant to be taken, which is a fast, frenetic combat game, not sort of a slow civilization build-up game. Those people tend not to like Kemet. I, however, really do. Let's go on to another game, which is a kind of a silly game with a serious theme. This is one of the best dungeon crawls ever. It was on my top dungeon crawl list, I believe. This one is one where the first edition was horrible, and I kept it because it looked so bad. But I also have the new edition, of course. And this game is Catacombs. Catacombs is a dungeon crawl, best played at 2. But what you are doing is you're going through the dungeon, but instead of rolls or playing cards for combat, you are flicking these discs, and what they hit is going to be how they do damage and how they move around this board. It's just really fascinating. There's so many different characters, so many different big bads. It is a game where you need an experienced person to run the bad guys. There's a lot of kind of maintenance to get it right. I wish there were a way to streamline that a little bit. But it can be really fun, especially as a 2-player game, because then, if you're playing with more than 2, you have one person who's the dungeon master and everyone else just plays a hero. And so there's a lot of waiting around between your turns. But as a 2-player game, it's almost always your turn. And it's your skill against my skill, which is really an interesting way for it to be. One of the best dexterity games there is, one of the best dungeon crawls. The new version looks great, too. It has sort of whimsical artwork that's quite charming. And that is one that I really love, Catacombs. Next up, we have a game. I don't tend to like auction games, but this one is one of the exceptions, and that's just because of how the auctioning works, which I find to be so fascinating. The game is themeless as usual, and kind of, an odd one, but it is, the game is called Keyflower. I'm sorry, I had a call coming in. I'm going to defer that till later. Keyflower is a game where you are running around. You're building up this city. You're not running around, and you're using your workers in 3 different colors. There's also a 4th color, which is green, to kind of bid for these tiles in this area. And you can also activate other people's areas. And when you do that, that's going to you're essentially going to be giving that worker to the other character. And so it can be really interesting as you kind of go through this. It's a fascinating, somebody really needs to talk to me. But I'll have to finish this up first. Anyway, it's a great game. It doesn't look the best. It doesn't have the greatest artwork, but it can be a really fun game in this interesting approach to bidding. I didn't put my number up here. That is Keyflower, my number 45. My number 44 is not a bidding game. It is a large, minis-focused dice rolling game called Marvel Zombies. So Marvel Zombies is a game where you are a Marvel character, and you are actually, the version I have, you're a zombie, and you're running through trying to chew up the heroes. This is a game it has a huge Galactus mini. It is in the Zombicide franchise, and it is my favorite of the Zombicide games. It's, a luck fest, lots of dice, lots of, seeing what's going to happen, but it can be really satisfying. You get hordes of bad guys that you're beating down, and you're just trying to get your goal out. It can take a long time. It can be kind of swingy, but it's really a fun game once you get into it. Marvel Zombies. My number 43 is a game called Small World, which is the reason I bought an iPad the very first time, was to play the app version of this. Small World is a combat game. It's like Risk, but better. right? Like if it were good. It's with deterministic combat. You've got these combinations of characters. You've got a race and a special power, and you've got these tokens, and you're trying to occupy spaces. Every space you occupy will get you a point. You're going to use the points to bid for new races, because eventually you're going to have to buy a new one and put your old one away. Lots of different combinations, lots of different characters. A really good game. I have the big fancy version, the Kickstarter deluxe one, which is almost too big to use, but even just the basic cardboard one is really good. It's always been one of my favorite games. It is Small World. My number 42, we're making great time here, is Mage Wars. Mage Wars went away from my list for a while, I believe, just because, and I guess it's Arena technically, because it's just a game. Oh, sorry. Is it? Yeah, Arena is the one I want. Academy's good too. It's just it's without the spatial aspect. But this is a game for people who want to invest their time in it. You're going to have a character and a spell book, which has all of your deck, and that deck is always available to you. Each turn you choose 2 cards to play. You're running around, you're trying to kill your opponent. My kind of game. The complications and the reasons I don't get to play it very often is because, of course, you can't just, it's not new player friendly. If I were to hand you a spell book and say, choose the 2 cards you want to play, you would have to spend half an hour reading through it. So it's a difficult game to get into. But once you do get into it, it's really fascinating. I have a sweet story with it where when my copy got destroyed, a kind person from the internet sent me a replacement. So I'm always going to cherish that as well. But the game itself, I mean, without the sentimental story, is just pretty darn good. My number 42, Mage Wars. And the last one on my list for today is a game that kind of feels like Mage Wars. This game is called Codex, Card Time Strategy. Similar to Mage Wars, similar to Mage Wars, it has a large spell book that you're going through and selecting your cards out of. Similar to sort of your Magic the Gathering style game, you're fighting against your opponent's life. You're kind of building up an economy as you're going along, building buildings, special abilities, and you've got this book, and you're going to upgrade champions, and you're going to pick the different paths. It's just a fascinating game. It's really complicated. It's colossally expensive. But once you get into it, if you can find somebody who's willing to kind of devote the time and play this game, it could be your favorite game. I really enjoy Codex. I do wish it were more accessible. I do wish it had a better name. I do wish it looked a little bit better. But the gameplay, I mean, man, this is just one of those games where I would love if I had somebody who wanted to get into this with me. Anyway, and that's kind of it. That we've made only half an hour today. Pretty good time. Those are my next 20 games. Next week, we're going to talk about my number 40 through 21, and that will be the last time we do this on Wednesday Whimsy, and then after that, I'll do the final show with Ilya with my top 20 games. But for that, these are some great games. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about them. I hope you'll be able to try some of them yourself. Until then, until next time, I'm going to wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I will see you hopefully next week on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.